So why is everyone, or at least a lot of scientists globally, so focused on Finnish DNA right now? It feels like more than just, finding health links.
Yeah.
It seems Finland might actually hold some keys to rare diseases, maybe longevity, and even how we think about genetic purity.
Okay, let's try and unpack this. When people say the Finland gene, what are we really talking about? It's not literally one gene, right?
No, exactly. It's not a single gene at all. It's more like a shorthand, a term researchers use for the very unique, quite isolated genetic structure of the Finnish people.
Isolated, okay.
And that isolation, that uniqueness, well, it's causing a lot of excitement in science, but also, some significant controversy in medical research circles.
So what's the science behind that uniqueness? Why Finland?
Well, the core reason is something called a genetic bottleneck. It's a key concept here.
Imagine, think of a bottle representing a large, diverse population. Now, maybe 4,000 years ago, you had these really harsh conditions in Finland, the geography, not much migration, those incredibly tough winters. So only a very small group, like the narrow neck of the bottle, sort of made it through to found the future population.
Ah, okay. So the diversity got squeezed out in a way.
Precisely. That bottleneck effect dramatically reduced the genetic diversity compared to the original group. It led to a much more homogeneous gene pool over generations.
Homogeneous meaning less varied.
Yes, less varied. And here's the paradox. You'd think that's a disadvantage, but scientifically, it's actually turned out to be incredibly useful.
That does make sense. So this historical isolation isn't just a historical footnote. It's actually a research tool.
A powerful one.
Okay. So our mission then for this deep dive, let's explore this whole phenomenon. Look at the scientific upsides, the ethical questions it raises, and maybe the societal debates too. We really want to help you, our listener, get properly informed on what's quite a captivating subject. So sticking with that isolation, what are the immediate benefits we've actually seen? You said it's useful. How?
Well, one of the most striking things is how this isolation made it much easier to identify genes linked to certain rare diseases. Over 35 of them, in fact. It's a cluster of conditions now often called the Finnish Disease Heritage.
Finnish Disease Heritage, right? Because they show up more often or more clearly there.
Exactly. They stand out more clearly against that more uniform genetic background. And this is a big reason why Finland is sometimes called a kind of world's genetic lab.
A genetic lab? How so?
Well, think about the Finnish Institute for Health and Welfare. They run this massive biobank, THL Biobank. It's genuinely one of the world's largest relative to population size. They have genetic data from over 500,000 people. And remember, Finland only has about 5.5 million people total.
Wow, okay. That's incredible participation.
It is. And think about finding a rare disease gene in a really diverse population. It's like finding one specific grain of sand on a huge beach. Really difficult.
Sure.
But in Finland's more homogeneous pool, those rare disease genes, they sort of pop out. They're easier to spot.
The direct advantages are?
Much easier detection of those specific disease-causing genes, faster identification of genetic links to all sorts of illnesses, not just the rare ones, and really powerful tools for developing precision medicine and new drugs tailored to specific genetic profiles.
Okay, but here's where it gets, tricky, right? This very advantage, the homogeneity, that's also the core of the controversy, isn't it? You hear critics arguing that relying so heavily on one ethnically specific, quite narrow population, well, could that lead to treatments or therapies that don't work as well for people with different, more diverse genetic backgrounds?
That's precisely the concern. It's a major point of discussion.
It raises a really fundamental question for all of us, I think. How do you balance using the amazing insights you get from a unique group like this with the risk that what you learn might not apply universally or could even create biases?
It's a critical balancing act, yeah.
And it's not just about disease, is it?
Yeah.
Does this unique genetic landscape tell us anything else? I find this idea of Finland's mental health resilience really interesting, especially given the long, dark winters, the historical isolation. You'd almost expect the opposite.
It is fascinating. And yeah, it's a bit of a puzzle. There are broadly two camps, two main theories trying to explain it. So first, there's the genetic hypothesis. Some scientists are looking at specific gene variants, things involved in regulating dopamine, the brain chemical linked to reward and mood, variants like DRD4 and COMT. The idea is maybe these specific versions are just a bit more common in Finnish DNA.
And that could affect mood or stability.
Potentially, yes. It might enhance how the brain processes rewards or handles stress. And there are some early preliminary studies, things looking at gene expression, suggesting Finnish kids might show lower cortisol reactivity to stress compared to other European kids, less of a stress hormone spike.
Interesting. But just a hypothesis for now.
Very much so. Then you have the other side, the cultural or environmental explanation.
Right.
This view suggests it's less about genes and more about other factors, things like Finland's excellent education system, the strong emphasis on spending time outdoors, and this really powerful cultural concept they call sisu.
Sisu, I've heard of that. It's like grit, determination.
Exactly. It's this deep-seated idea of stoic determination, resilience, perseverance, even when things are really tough. So this hypothesis asks, how much resilience is nature versus nurture, inherited versus learned?
Yeah, the age-old question, probably a bit of both, I imagine.
Most likely, yes. It's rarely just one thing.
Okay, let's shift slightly. There's another apparent contradiction here that you mentioned earlier. Finland has high rates of some of these rare Finnish heritage diseases.
Correct. Things like congenital nephrotic syndrome, dystrophic dysplasia,
Oh, wait.
they are more common there than elsewhere in Europe.
Right. But at the same time, Finland has one of the lowest infant mortality rates anywhere in the world. Like you said, 1.7 deaths per 1,000 births in 2023. That seems paradoxical.
It does seem that way on the surface. High risk for some conditions, yet very low infant deaths overall.
So how does that work?
Well, researchers argue that the paradox is actually resolved because of the detailed genetic knowledge they have. The low infant mortality isn't despite the genetic risks. It's, in part, thanks to understanding them. They have very advanced early genetic screening programs. They can offer highly tailored treatments. They can often predict the likelihood of certain inherited conditions even before a child is born.
So the knowledge allows them to intervene effectively.
Precisely. It all stems from that deep understanding of the population's specific genetic profile.
With that level of prediction, that must raise some ethical flags, too.
It certainly does, and this leads into a really significant bioethics concern. Some scholars, some ethicists, they worry that these kinds of advanced predictive capabilities, if we're not careful, could nudge us towards genetic determinism.
Genetic determinism meaning your DNA dictates your future.
Kind of. The idea that someone's future, their potential, maybe even their perceived worth could become overly tied to their genetic code, overshadowing things like environment, personal choices, opportunity.
That sounds uncomfortable.
It is. And it's not about stopping progress, but it raises that crucial question. Where is the line between using genetic information for good, for prediction and prevention, and potentially using it in ways that limit people or create new forms of discrimination? It's a really complex discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And this complexity, it feels like it bleeds into perhaps the most difficult area, the politicization of all this, the Finland gene idea being used in ways it was never intended.
Yes, that's unfortunately happened. It's a tough subject because you have fringe groups, extremist groups, who have taken the scientific concept of genetic distinctiveness.
Which comes from historical isolation.
Exactly, which comes from geography and history. And they've twisted it. They misuse it to promote really harmful ideas about ethnic purity or even racial superiority.
Which is completely missing the scientific point.
Completely. And it's absolutely vital to stress how strongly mainstream scientists push back against this distortion. They are crystal clear. The uniqueness of Finnish DNA is a product of population history, bottlenecks, isolation, migration patterns. It has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with notions of superiority or inferiority.
But the narrative gets misused anyway.
It does. And
Yeah.
this misuse isn't just an abstract problem. It feeds into real-world exclusionary rhetoric, often targeting immigrants or pushing back against multiculturalism. And it fuels these intense debates within Finland and elsewhere about national identity, about who belongs, about inclusion, especially as Finland itself is becoming more diverse.
So it really shows how scientific findings, even when carefully stated by researchers, can be taken out of context and weaponized.
Definitely. It highlights that responsibility not just in doing the science, but in communicating it carefully and anticipating potential misuse.
So after digging into all this, the science, the benefits, the controversies, the ethics, where does that leave us? What does it all mean? It really feels like the story of the Finland gene is this powerful case study. It shows the immense promise of genetic research, right? But also how tangled up it gets with really complex ethical questions and societal impacts. It's definitely got this dual nature.
Absolutely. A potential treasure chest of medical knowledge, but one that requires very careful handling.
So maybe the thought to leave our listeners with is this. How do you see it? Is Finland's unique gene pool primarily a medical gift, offering invaluable insights that could ultimately benefit everyone? Or does focusing so much on one unique group risk leading us down a kind of scientific rabbit hole? One where we might over-rely on findings that aren't universally applicable, and where the potential for misuse, as we discussed, is always lurking.
It really comes down to that balance, doesn't it? Finding the right way to harness the power of this kind of research while staying grounded in strong ethical principles and being aware of the broader societal context. It's something we all need to keep thinking about as genetic science advances.
We definitely encourage you to continue exploring these ideas on your own. It's a conversation that's only going to become more relevant.